everyone, and welcome to episode 38 of What to Think, VentureBeat's weekly tech podcast. I'm Dylan Sweeney. I'm here with
Mark Sullivan.
Right on cue, and today we're going to be talking to Emerson Spartz. He's the founder of viral content publisher Spartz Media, which you might know better as the publisher of Dose.com, OMGFacts.com, and some other viral content sites. He actually got his start at age 12 as the founder of MuggleNet, a Harry Potter fan site. We're going to find out how he makes content go viral and what the future of online content is. But first, let's talk about some tech news highlights from the past week on VentureBeat. I think the first thing I want to talk about is the Microsoft Windows 10 event that happened earlier this week. We had VentureBeat's Jordan Novett up in Redmond covering the news. Basically, Windows 10 is coming. We're going to have a mobile version of Windows 10 in about a month, the first versions of it. And this is, for the first time, Microsoft is going to have essentially the same operating system on its phones, its tablets, and PCs.
Yeah, that's the interesting part here, I think, is like other OS makers. They're really doubling down on this idea of being able to move content back and forth between different types of screens, start some content on one and move to another.
Now, I wonder where they got that idea.
Yeah, it's original thinking. But perhaps more importantly, it's the home screen looks different, and it's just a more robust offering, it looks like. And also, they're offering a free upgrade to Windows 10 for people who already have Windows 8.1 or are using Windows Phone 8.1 or have been for a year.
Or even Windows 7. You can upgrade
Windows
for free.
7.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So there are a couple interesting things that popped out at me. One is they're going to be using Cortana, their voice assistant, which is sort of like Siri or Google Now, pretty much everywhere. So voice command will be baked into this. And there's this interesting, weird thing that they showed off called the HoloLens, which is a holographic view. It's kind of Microsoft's attempt to get into augmented reality, virtual reality, put these glasses on, and they superimpose floating 3D glowing objects on the world around you.
I was a bit surprised when I first saw this, but I guess it shouldn't be much of a surprise given Microsoft's experience with some of these types of experiences in gaming. This thing is a little bit different than Oculus Rift and Samsung's product in that it's a layering on effect of content. You can still see the outside world. You can
still see the real world.
Right.
It's just got things
it's got
that
things,
appear to be in it that aren't really there.
Hopefully there's going to be sort of interplay between the things that are layered on and the environment, which is, that's really true augmented reality, the way I understood it. Whereas Oculus Rift and Samsung, that's a completely immersive experience where you can't see the outside world.
You shut out the world, that's right. Yeah. Microsoft had a couple really slick demo videos showing people doing things like resizing a virtual screen on the blank wall in their living room or working with a 3D model on their desk next to their computer just by gesturing. Pretty cool stuff. I'm a little skeptical as to how well this will work and whether people actually want to do it in the real world, but it's, props to Microsoft for doing something really kind of freaking cool.
Yeah, I agree. It looks cool.
Also in the cool department, you will soon be able to play via streaming internet connection any Xbox games that you've bought for your Xbox. You'll be able to play them on your Windows 10 computer, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to T-Mobile CEO John Legere, is one of my favorite characters. And if you have any small children listening to this podcast, you may want to cover their ears right now because he's famous for using vulgar language, and we're going to quote some of it. His boss, the CEO of Deutsche Telekom,
Timotheus Hotchkiss, I believe.
Okay, some stuffy German name.
Yeah.
Said that. So he had some comments. Deutsche Telekom's chief had some comments that T-Mobile's approach to being an uncarrier is an unsustainable business model. What did John Legere have to say to that?
Well, he said on Twitter, quote, "It's complete bullshit," unquote, is what he said.
That's pretty impressive, saying that something that your boss said is bullshit. I mean, that takes some stones.
Yeah, we've learned a lot about this guy, Legere, in his public pronouncements. He's rude, he's vulgar, he loves to go a long way toward cutting down his AT&T, Verizon, Sprint competition. But, I think we actually learned a little bit about the way he gets along with people within within his own organization as well.
I got the impression that the German CEO was kind of like, oh, that's John being John. It's okay.
Yeah.
I would never fly here in Germany, but it's okay. And
it's all a persona, obviously.
It's a show.
It is a show and an entertaining one. And I doubt that it caused any real problems at the headquarters. But
tell the listeners what to think about T-Mobile's current offerings. Is it really an Un-carrier?
I think that it is doing some things that are changing the industry. You have to give credence to the fact that AT&T and T-Mobile or Verizon and Sprint are starting to follow some of the pricing models that
the rollover data minutes.
That's a good example. So if you don't use all your data one month, you can roll it over to the next month, and it's not just taken away from you. So AT&T is already working on their version of that, and there have been other things. So I think what you're seeing is what they said was that T-Mobile is spending between $4 and $5 billion a year just trying to keep up with AT&T and Verizon. And I think that when you're cutting rates, you're not able to gain back some of that money. Meanwhile, AT&T and Verizon have stronger networks, and they have stronger spectrum portfolios and the money to buy more spectrum. So it's going to have to be a revolution for them. They're really going to have to turn a lot of people their way to make the business part of it work out.
So he's got nothing to lose by being showy and splashy and a little controversial.
I think it's all part of the plan.
Yeah. All right. Well, wish him luck. I think the more we can shake up the existing carriers, the better. But maybe T-Mobile doesn't have enough clout to do it. Tell us about digital health. You were at a conference last week that sounded really interesting from JP Morgan.
Yeah, it was a really interesting conference, especially coming from CES and going to that. This was, a very suited up, jacketed tie kind of affair, and a lot
bankers
of bankers a lot, and the food was good.
You don't get that at CES.
Yeah, not so much, not so much. But this conference in San Francisco has been going on for a few years, and it's typically about biotech and the pharmaceutical industry, and sort of these CEOs get up and talk about their numbers and try to convince everybody that they're going to be a good investment. But this year there were quite a few startups there. Digital health is starting to make a real imprint on this conference, and there's a lot of interest and energy around new companies that were not public companies.
Now, what do you mean? What, like, by digital health? Are you talking about fitness trackers? Are you talking about digital health records?
It's a totally legitimate question, because I think that maybe the umbrella is a little too wide in that. So this can be anything from fitness tracking to things that gather data from wearables and other places and try to make sense of things like that, to companies like Aledade, which I've written about, which is a platform that sort of borrows data from the computer patient record in the hospital and the billing system and the claims system, and tries to figure out which patients are most at risk and figure out better ways of treating those patients. So there's stuff on way over toward the consumer side with the wearable stuff and fitness stuff, and then there's stuff that's like deep into the systems in the hospital side.
But what you're saying is the Wall Street guys are interested in this now.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting. We're not just talking about wacky gadgets now or crazy ideas that somebody, deep in the Obamacare planning phases had. We're now talking about people who think they can make some serious money from digital health products.
Yeah, and I think you can look at Obamacare as sort of the first mover in a lot of this, because, the emphasis under Obamacare, provided that it isn't struck down by a court somewhere, which I doubt is going to happen at this point. The emphasis there is paying healthcare providers based on the value of their care, at their ability to keep people away from the healthcare system, as opposed to just doing procedure upon procedure upon procedure, and then compensating them for each one of those.
For all the procedures, right.
There's a lot of energy toward figuring out who the sickest patients are and the best strategies for keeping them out of the system.
And data and technology can play a big role in that.
Huge role. And then there's also the diagnostic part. We're looking at the genome, and there's this mountain of data involved with figuring out what markers connect with what diseases. So you have those highly clinical startups as well, but they're investment opportunities, and the street has gotten excited about it. There were 5 big IPOs in the space last year. Those stocks aren't looking great in terms of their value right now, but players like JP Morgan are very happy about their experience of taking those companies public.
And companies like Castlight.
Castlight is the perfect example. That was a good experience for them, and they're looking for more action of that type in 2015, and I think you're going to see at least 5 big IPOs in this space in 2015.
Okay, well, we will make a note of that, and we'll be looking for your coverage. Mark, thank you for the update from the JP Morgan Health Tech Conference. For all this and more tech news, just go to VentureBeat.com. You can find the stories we just talked about and many more. We're going to go to our guest, Emerson Spartz, next, but first, a message from our sponsor. The What to Think podcast is brought to you from the San Francisco headquarters of New Relic, which helps customers make sense of billions of data points about millions of applications in real time. I'm going to lay some numbers on you. 250,000 users leverage New Relic to analyze more than 690 billion data points per day across more than 4 million application instances. New Relic provides powerful insight into your overall environment from the web to native mobile apps and more, and you can learn more at newrelic.com. Now I'd like to welcome our guest, Emerson Spartz. He is one of the world's leading experts on internet virality and has been featured in all kinds of major media. He's the CEO of Spartz Inc., which is one of the fastest growing digital media publishers, reaching 160 million page views per month. Emerson, thank you for joining us on What to Think.
Thanks for having me.
160 million is a lot. How do you reach that many people? And it's not just one site, right?
Right. We have a portfolio of about 20 sites.
And what are your main sites right now?
Our biggest sites are dose.com, DOSE.com, omgfacts.com. And we have a bunch of meme sites too. Like we have a website with funny iPhone autocorrects that went pretty viral a couple years ago. Traffic is nowhere near where it used to be on that one, but it still does pretty decent numbers. We also have MuggleNet, the #1 Harry Potter website.
Now, MuggleNet is where you got your start, right? You were just 12 when you started that.
That's right.
Tell me a little bit about that. How does a 12-year-old suddenly become like this viral media maven and start running this hugely popular Harry Potter fan site?
When I was 12, I convinced my parents to let me drop out of school and start homeschooling myself.
Homeschooling yourself?
Yes.
Okay.
In the beginning, I just built things. I came across a free web page maker. I thought it'd be fun to make a website, so I started making a bunch of websites. And then I got really into Harry Potter and started spending all of my time building the Harry Potter website. Really didn't intend for it to be a business. I just wanted to make the best Harry Potter website in the world. And then, fast forwarding time a decade, and I ended up spending a good 8 to 10 hours a day, every day, working on it. It was what kind of gave me my intro to the important business concepts that I would then apply later. But MuggleNet, just for some very quick context on what MuggleNet would eventually become, because people have very different ideas of what that means to have a Harry Potter website. The site was doing about 50 million page views a month, and it was really a collection of different properties. So we had one of the biggest forums online, one of the biggest fan fiction sites, one of the biggest RPGs. We published a number of books, one of which became a New York Times bestseller. We had one of the most popular podcasts in the world. It was a part paid, part volunteer staff of about 120. So I had to grow up very, very quickly, but I learned a little bit of everything.
So these are all things that kind of grew out of out of the initial site. You're like, oh, we could do an RPG, or oh, we could publish some of this fanfic and become a book, right? It's like, it sounds like it sort of grew organically over time into many different media. Is that?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I actually started with a very niche idea. I wanted to just do reviews of other Harry Potter websites. I basically feature creeped into doing every single thing for Harry Potter fans, but it didn't start that way.
As you started to accumulate a lot of traffic, you started attracting quite a bit of advertiser interest. What was your experience with that, and how were you able to sort of deal with that, emerging business?
Well, initially, because I didn't view it as a business, I didn't have any intentions of making money. But as the site grew, I got a bill for $200 for the server costs. And,
and you're what, like 12 or 14 at this time?
Yeah, and when you're that age, $200 may as well be $2 billion. So I said, okay, well, I'll put up one ad just long enough to pay for the server bill. And then the ad started making a lot of money, and I was like, okay, well, I'll leave it up for just the rest of the month, and we'll see what happens. And that ad ended up making about $6,000 that month. And so again, changed my tune of advertising pretty quickly. Like, one ad's not going to kill anyone.
Yeah. Back then, were you working with an ad network, or was it just sort of a one-on-one approach from somebody who just wanted to get in front of that traffic?
It was a combination of ad networks and individual advertisers who wanted to reach Harry Potter audiences.
All right.
I guess what I'm wondering is, like, it sounds like at some point, this thing that started out as like a little project for your own interest suddenly like really took off in terms of popularity. Was there something that like was the inflection point for you there, or something that you discovered or stumbled upon that really made it take off? Or can you point to one thing?
There were three things. The first thing was that as I was building the site, I wanted people to come to it, but I didn't know how to get the word out about it. I realized that other fandoms were doing this thing where they would link to each other. Like, you link to my site, I'll link to yours. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, I should do that too. This was kind of before search engines. So I went and I emailed every single Harry Potter webmaster on the entire internet. I wanted to do a link trade. And it was really unglamorous, just kind of hustle work, but it worked. And I got, maybe, a couple hundred websites linking to me. And so people started discovering the site. And then the second big thing was that people started submitting things for me to put up on the website. Like this one girl, she loved drawing fan art. And so she'd draw all these different, Harry Potter art things. And I was like, well, instead of me putting these up, why don't you just, put up your own stuff on the fan art page? And then she ended up kind of just taking over the whole fan art section. And then, had this like idea go off, like, wow, that was great. I don't have to do that anymore. I didn't like doing that. She loves it. This is perfect. So I started recruiting other people to come help who were very good at very specific things. So I started applying basic management science to what was otherwise a very primitive fandom. And so where our competitors were all done by, kids, before their parents sent them to bed. And there were, hundreds of thousands of Harry Potter websites. MuggleNet had a much bigger team creating a lot more content. And then the third thing was that I spent a lot of time studying other Harry Potter websites and looking for what they were doing that was better than what I was doing, so I could get ideas for what I could do to improve. And then, I got to a point of parity where, MuggleNet was as good as the best Harry Potter sites. And so I started looking at other fandoms for what they were doing that I could learn from. And so I started just looking everywhere for inspiration for how I could improve. And so I'd get lots of ideas like, I should add comments to news posts, or I should add, a poll on the site, which doesn't sound like a terribly innovative idea. But back in, the late 90s, early 2000s, this was pretty innovative stuff. And so what would happen is like I would kind of import a lot of these ideas from other fandoms like Lord of the Rings, Simpsons, Dragon Ball Z, etc. And then other Harry Potter websites would get inspiration from MuggleNet, and the entire Harry Potter website community would evolve very quickly as a result of this.
Yeah. At some point, this became more than just Harry Potter, though, right? Are these things that you learned and then realized that you could use to make other kinds of sites? Or were you even thinking in terms of virality at that point?
I'd never connected what the word meant to anything that I was doing, but I was certainly starting to lay the groundwork for the principles of virality. I just thought of it at the time as it was just a kind of a fun project that I was spending much of my time and energy into, but the principles were very obviously applicable across a wide variety of different subjects. Some of my senior staff members at MuggleNet went off to go create some of the largest fan communities in other major fandoms, like the largest Hunger Games, Twilight, etc.
Okay. I guess I'm wondering now, as the CEO of Spartz Media, and you're running a bunch of different sites, obviously you've had a tremendous amount of success driving page views and driving attention and driving revenues from this business. Many of the people listening to this podcast and many of the people who read VentureBeat want to know how to do that with their own businesses or their own sites. Are there generalizable things? Is there advice that you can give people about how to build an audience and how to foster that kind of virality?
The general ideas that I would want to share would be, when you think about virality and what motivates people to share, and you're thinking about your business or whatever it is you're trying to get people to share, think about it from their perspective. And when you share something, what happens? Well, you have to create a lot of emotion to get somebody to share. Think of what happens typically when you're kind of sitting back in your chair and you're going, you click, 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 and you might look at 100 pieces of content before you see one that you're actually motivated to share. What that one piece of content did, that article did, was it created so much of the right kind of emotion within you that it actually inspired you to action. So content has to be really awesome. It's got to create a lot of emotional impact. And if I had to summarize everything that I've learned about virality into one very general, almost obnoxiously abstract idea, it's that the more incentive you give people to share, the more likely they are to share. When I think of virality, I think of two different categories of virality. There's incentivized virality, where you basically incentivize somebody to share, bribing them with coupons or discounts or one-for-ones or things like that. For example, refer a friend, we'll give you a 10% coupon, or we'll give you and your friend both a 10% coupon, things like that. And for most businesses, I think this is actually the most effective way to try to create more virality, just giving people, financial incentives to share. Because most people aren't going to have businesses that are going to create so much emotion that people are going to be wanting to, share it with all their friends. And this is how a lot of people were able to get, lots of Facebook likes and Twitter followers, is through having campaigns where, they would, give you a discount if you liked them on Facebook or followed them on Twitter, and then they would get this big burst of followers, and then that would be a good base for them to promote future products to. So that very generally would be the route that I would recommend most business owners go down. The other category is emotional virality. When you share something because it inspires so much emotion within you that you wanted to share. And there's some emotions that work better than other emotions. Positive, uplifting emotions tend to work better than negative emotions, with the exception of anger. Anger is an emotion that can be very powerfully motivating to share, as anybody who's had partisan friends on Facebook has no doubt has no doubt observed, or they call it justice porn. There's this injustice in the world, and I don't know how to make it right, so I'm just going to share this thing, and hopefully spread the word about it a bit. But anger can obviously backfire too, so there's risks. But like positive, uplifting emotion tends to be what you're more likely to want to share. Cute animals, nostalgia, these are things that create. I don't need to talk about those because they're just kind of obvious and they create positive emotion. Current events, people are talking about something. There's a lot of energy in the atmosphere about it. So those types of things tend to be more shareable as well. And also, people want to look cool. When you share something on a subconscious level, you're asking yourself, if I share this, will this make me look cool to my Facebook friends?
You're accessorizing in a way.
Right. You want to project the image to the world that's the best possible version of you, which is why people, will share articles that they haven't even read, because the article looks like, wow, this looks really smart. Like only smart people would read this really long, boring article about something businessy or, geopoliticky.
Yes.
So, and this is also the reason why nobody shares porn.
Yeah. I was wondering if you ever go over this argument in your mind about, from my point of view as a journalist, we often see that it's trivial stuff that tends to be most clicked or most shared. What are your feelings about, just sort of this idea that, a lot of this stuff is really not very meat and potatoes stuff, but it's more, candy.
People love candy.
They do, yes.
I look at it like it's a reflection of what people actually value. Not that the deeper, more substantial investigative reporting can't go viral. It's just that the way that it's typically packaged, it makes it dull and dry. And I think a lot of this is presentation. And the cute candy stuff tends to be easier to present because it's usually picture-based. But more substantive stuff, which tends to be more word-based, is just harder to motivate people to actually take the time to read because it's a lot of work.
Related to this, you've said in other interviews that you want to change the world, right, at a massive scale. Can you say what you mean by that?
It's just very generally this notion that I want to make the world a better place. And, I'm at a phase in my career where I'm very early. I'm learning at what feels like a blindingly fast pace. I'm on my second company, and I'm facing new challenges and new things every day, and I'm learning more about how the world works. So this is just very generally like the impact that I want to create in the world is positive. And I have tons of ideas for how to do that. But right now I'm more focused on just learning and development and growth. So that's more of like an aspirational, longer term perspective. If I was focused right in the short term on creating the largest, most positive impact, virality to me is fascinating because it's a tool. It's a tool for influence. And if you can, if you really understand the patterns of virality, you could theoretically use that to tip elections, help make sure that the right people are in public office who can make decisions that make the world a better place. You could revolutionize industries by, reshaping the messaging of an issue. You could help to create more public support behind it. There's a wide variety of ways that you could use, virality as a tool to create impact. But I'm still in the learning phase of my career.
Talking about millennials, and I know that much of the advertising community and a lot of brands are really challenged to sort of reach millennials in ways that can lead to positive outcomes, i.e. sales, I guess. But sort of more on the political side, have you been approached by people who are interested in reaching millennials on political issues?
Yes, although usually when we get approached, it's less about reaching millennials, and it's more just about how can their campaign or their party use viral principles to better craft their messages and spread their ideas and ultimately help influence their elections. Because these principles are applicable to more than just millennials.
Yeah, fair enough. I wanted to ask you about one of your sites, OMG Facts. It wasn't quite what I expected. I mean, it's really a collection of articles about things about our world that aren't well known and that not a lot of people realize. Is that a fair assessment of what that is?
Our target for that website is people who want to be entertained, but also learn something at the same time. Uh-huh. So the information can be, like the facts about the history of sledding. Is that going to be tremendously useful for you to know? Probably not. But it tends to be of curiosity. It tends to be something that people who are curious and want to learn about history or might have an interest in sledding or just, obscure trivia that are more interested in seeing. Another list being like, the world was a darker place 25 years ago when these things weren't around. And it helps shine a little bit of a light on different technologies and how those technologies, have changed the world, et cetera. But that's the general audience. It's like educational entertainment. Yeah,
and that it's a pretty extreme array there too. I mean, I just glanced at it today, and I saw the article that you just mentioned, but I also saw an article about porn stars.
There can be facts about porn stars too.
Definitely, yeah.
Not surprisingly, with that list, that's been one of our most popular lists, and it's a list that has a very high click-through rate, but a very low share-through rate.
Yeah. Right. Like you were saying earlier, people don't exactly want to share porn or stories about porn, but they might click on them.
Exactly. And in that case, it's like educational facts about porn stars. And
how does that site rank in terms of traffic among all of the sites?
It's our second most popular site.
The second most popular. Okay. And again, the most popular is?
Dose.com.
Okay. And what's sort of the idea around Dose, and how is it different than the OMG site?
Dose is purely entertainment. It's what we're doing is we are sharing the most viral content from across the web, and we equate virality with quality, and that's very debatable, of course, because to your point, the lighter, snackier stuff tends to be more viral than the deeper, more substantive stuff. But one is subjective and the other is objective, and we've elected to go down the route of using the objective metric for quality. So the more something gets shared, the more that we consider it to be a success. So Dose is just the most viral stuff from across the web, and OMG Facts is the most viral stuff from across the web that's educational. That's like the general theme difference between Dose and OMG Facts.
That's a very almost Darwinian definition of quality in the age of viral content, right? The stories that survive are like the fittest by virtue of the fact that they survive and get shared around a lot, right?
Yes.
Do you think that's going to have long-term effects on the kind of content that people have? You have a portfolio of sites with Spartz Media, but there's also, BuzzFeed, Mashable, Upworthy. I mean, there are a whole bunch of sites that are doing similar kinds of things. Do you see this whole sort of Darwinian evolution of content leading to more and more cute puppy slideshows, or is there room for kind of substantive, electoral politics stuff that you were talking about earlier?
I think there's room for everything. I think that a lot of the more substantive type of, let's say, investigative reporting is a little bit behind the times with how it's presented. Mm-hmm. And so even when there's actually a fascinating story that could be told, it's still told using, what I consider to be older ideas for how to present information. Again, like long, big bodies of text, like just really dull stuff that if it was told, with more pictures and, better, more multimedia and snappier, the kind of stuff that we do with our content. I think that there's lots of great stories that are deeper that would be told, but it doesn't mean that people are going to be willing to read the 5,000 word version of it. They might want the snap version of it. They want to be informed. A lot of the work that's been done has been propped up, again, this more substantive stuff. For most of the history of media, if you had a local monopoly in your town and you were the only one reporting the news, then you could write about just about anything and people would still buy the paper. You'd have to do a really, really bad job. But with the internet and, the fact that anybody can compete with you, it means that you have to give people what they want or you will not be in business. Mm-hmm. So it does mean that, that the content mix and types are going to change.
Who actually set in stone that, we had to wrap ads around things like news and sports when really with social media, it's becoming democratized what we say is the good content that people want.
Right. And I think it resembles the shift that as a society we made towards more democratic societies where the people elect their leaders to represent them. And I think the same thing is happening with content. People have more ability to vote for the content they want because they have more options for content to consume. Whereas not that long ago, you only had 3 TV stations and you had a couple radio stations and maybe your local newspaper. You had like a half dozen options. And now you've got the world at your fingertips. And so what that means is that you can get content that is more tailored to your tastes. And it forces those who might have had monopolies before to evolve and, with the times or to die in typical evolutionary fashion.
Well, unfortunately, that's about all the time that we have to talk with you, Emerson. I really appreciate your taking the time to chat with us here at VentureBeat. and wish you the best of luck. We'll be checking out your content at dose.com and omgfacts.com and all the others.
Thanks very much.
And thank you for joining us for What to Think, VentureBeat's technology news podcast. We're here every week broadcasting from the studios of New Relic. And as always, you can find us online at venturebeat.com or in iTunes or Stitcher or any of the other popular podcasting platforms. Just search for What to Think on iTunes and you will find us there. Until next week, I'm Dylan Tweeney.
And I'm Mark Sullivan.
Catch you later.